Welcome to Rambam in Depth. Today we'll be discussing the Rambam Hilchas Kilayim, Perek Gimel, Halacha Hey. The Rambam says as follows. This is in the laws of the prohibition of grafting one tree to another, or sowing seeds of one species to another in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rambam says that there are times when they could be different species, technically, botanically, they can be different species, but they're so similar that they would not be considered Kilayim. This is what the Rambam says. There are other kinds, besides the ones he enumerated before, of seeds and trees, even though they're naturally two different species, and that would subject them to the prohibition of Kilayim. But nevertheless, the Rambam says, since the leaves of this species is similar to the leaves of the other one, or the fruit of this tree is similar to the fruit of the other tree, and the Rambam emphasizes dimyan gadol, exceedingly similar, they appear like two different colors of one species, so that they're essentially the same in terms of their appearance. This is not concerned with regard to the prohibition of Kilayim. And the reason is, the principle here, that when it comes to Kilayim, we only go by the appearance. And even though technically they are different species, but because they appear to be so similar, they are not subject to the law of Kilayim. Now, the authorities, Chreinim, deal with a question of a grafted Esrog. In order to make an Esrog tree more sturdy, it's very common for the people who grow Esrogim to graft it to a lemon tree. Lemon and Esrog look very much the same. They're both citrus fruits that have similar appearances. And the question is that kosher for the mitzvah of taking the Lulav and Esrog on Sukkot? So the Halacha is that it's not kosher. The Alter Rebbe in Hilchas Lulav, Siman Tafresh Memches, Sif Lamed Aleph, sums it up as follows. Esrog hamurkav, and grafted Esrog, the Hainu, Shirkivei Anaf Me'ilan Ech Acher L'Teich Ilun HaEsrog. He grafted the branches of another tree into an Esrog tree. And the same thing would be true if it goes the other way around also. As the Tzemach Tzedek says, you graft the Esrog tree into the lemon tree, and Begadol Mehen Min Hadaimil Esrog, and what comes out is a species that is very similar to the Esrog. Posel, it is invalid. Shezeh Einei Esrog Klal. This is not called an Esrog, Elahu Bria B'fnei Atzma. It's a separate species. And then he goes on to say that Varba Simanim Yesh Lahavchem Ben Esrog Hamurchav Milemen or LeEsrog Ha'acher. In other words, there are four ways we can discern the difference between a grafted Esrog with a lemon and another Esrog, or Esrog Ha'echad rather, to the Esrog that is only one but hasn't been grafted. And he goes on to show the differences between the Esrog that wasn't grafted and an Esrog that was grafted. So the question is, why is that it's not a kosher Esrog? So some Achreinim suggest the idea that it's forbidden to graft the two trees to one another, and since it's forbidden, a forbidden act was done to produce the Esrog, it therefore is not permissible to use it. That's why, just like you're not allowed to bring a korban, a sacrifice from an animal that was crossbred with another animal, that's forbidden to do. So that animal, that product of that animal is not kosher for a sacrifice. Similarly, for doing a mitzvah, you cannot have an Esrog that was grafted with a lemon because an avera was done with that. But the Shvus Yankiv says no. Based on this Rambam, it would not be a prohibition. Why? Because whenever one fruit is identical, it looks like identical to a second fruit, it looks like two colors of one species, there is no prohibition of Kilayim. And therefore, it's only the appearance. And if you go by appearance, the Esrog and the lemon look very similar. That's what the Shvus Yankiv says. But most other authorities disagree, and they say, for other reasons, that this is not, as the Alter Rebbe says, this is not really an Esrog. It's a separate species. It's a combination of two different species, which creates an independent species. But also, one could argue that this is not similar to what the Rambam is saying. The Rambam is talking about where they look mamish identical. The only difference is their color. But a lemon and esrog look different. In fact, there are some similarities, but I don't think it would fit into the words of the Rambam, who says that there have to be dimyan gadol, very, very similar. And especially as the Alter Rebbe shows that there are 4 differences between a grafted esrog and an esrog that has not been grafted. So according to that, the Rambam's psak would not be applicable here, because it would be forbidden to graft one with the other. But at any rate, the halacha is that the esrog hamurkav is not kosher for the mitzvah, and the Alter Rebbe in the next siman paskins that even b'shas adchak, even you have nothing else, you can't use anything else, you should not use an esrog hamurkav.